You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Joining us now, Clark Mercer. Clark is the Chief of Staff of Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Hey, Clark, good to have you with us.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
Look, I really appreciate it. Now, the governor making a big decision yesterday. Let's start this one by one, closing schools through the end of the school year in 2020. We assume they'll reopen in August when schools come back. I have to tell you right off the bat, I agreed with this decision because I think parents and everybody else, the school system, we need certainty going forward. I think this 2 weeks in and out, 2 weeks in and out. People don't know what plans to make. And look, it is what it is. But walk us through that decision, why it happened.
Sure. Well, it's a tough decision, to put it mildly. I got home last night and I had two kids that like school, so they were pretty upset with me. But look, this is we've got 130 some odd jurisdictions in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and each superintendent is, to your point, making plans on how they're going to get kids the food that they need when the schools are out, the education packets and the learning that they need when they're out. Parents need certainty. Kids who are seniors, we've got to get the waivers from the federal government to make sure we can facilitate graduating and getting ready for college. And we've got buses throughout the Commonwealth, bus drivers stepping up, delivering food in drop-off points around communities. And this 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off does not give our jurisdictions the certainty, to your point, that they need to plan. And I think other superintendents have talked with other chiefs of staffs around the country, and they're having the same debate. Whether, do we push out another 2 weeks, do we put it to May, or do we just recognize that the school year is probably shot at this point? It's a difficult decision. Look, I had yesterday I was supposed to be gone for the day up in Northern Virginia to see my nephew play high school soccer. This is a big season for him, to be recruited by the colleges, and ironic that was the day the governor made this decision. It has impacts far and wide for our students, for their families. Child care is a major, major issue when you make a decision like this, making sure we got the guidance to our child care providers first and foremost so that they can stay open and take care of kids whose parents are first responders who are in the hospitals. We have almost 80,000 children across the Commonwealth whose parents work in the healthcare system. We got to make sure those kids can be cared for. Broadband and connectivity is a major issue. Folks say, well, let's go 100% online and continue the classwork. That sounds good if you can get the resources and be online and do that. Americans with Disabilities Act is a major factor. You've got to give all the kids by law the same access to educational material. So there's a lot of things to consider. But to your point, the governor said, look, come May 1st, we're probably not going to be in that much of a different situation in terms of being able to open these schools. A lot of the private schools start graduating in May. So he thought it would be best to give certainty to the parents and to the superintendents around the school system.
At the end of the story here, you're dealing with about 7 weeks. I mean, everybody shuts down at the end of May. All the private schools certainly do. That's where mine does. But I think you have to bring certainty to this. It's painful. It's difficult. It's not fair. Look, Clark, we all feel, those with kids and family members that are seniors, it's terrible for them because, they don't get to go to the senior prom. They don't get to do all the stuff that we did as upperclassmen. If they're playing baseball like my son Joseph or soccer like your nephew, it's gone. The whole season is gone. I think our team played 2 games, season over. Now we're hoping that the summer seasons is not canceled. So these are not.
And I know you coached for a number of years. I coached high school sports for 8 years, and I hear you. It's not taken lightly. So.
No, but it is what it is, and that's I know that's a favorite saying. So it drives some people bananas, but I mean it is what it is. You had to make a decision, and after the shock of it, families say, okay, I have 8 weeks. I've got April and May until the summer comes. What do I do? So do the planning now. Figure it out. Certainly, broadband's a big issue. How are we dealing with that? I mean, if you can't get online, there's a lot of communities in Virginia, especially in Southwest area and deep South Side, they don't have access to fast internet. Now, what do you do?
Well, look, I mean, we've got teachers stepping up left and right and superintendents. Our superintendent of K-12 education, he was a superintendent of a large jurisdiction in Chesterfield, which has, broadband connectivity. He was also superintendent of a rural district in the northern neck, and so each jurisdiction is different. We've got folks with packet pickup for curriculum. We've got teachers calling homes, checking in on the kids, making recommendations. If you've got, we've got an app through Hanover County that's updated. I'll tell you, the superintendent, the teachers have been terrific there. But it's a scramble, and every jurisdiction, to your point, is different. Obviously, broadband has been and will be a priority. The governor, his first budget year, he wanted to put in $50 million a year for 5 years to get everyone connected. The legislature brought that down to $19 million a year. Still, that's a lot of money and a lot more than we've ever put in, so I commend them for that. But it's been a priority, but there are still pockets throughout Virginia where we don't have that connectivity. So,
how do you plan to deal with that, Clark?
Well, just like I said, I mean, there are folks, teachers calling. There's physical packet pickups, and for the students. And then the superintendent of schools is sending direction today to all of our superintendents and is on the line 24/7 troubleshooting and talking. Some of the test requirements that we're going to have to get waivers for, we will get waivers from the administration in D.C. to make sure kids can graduate. But there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to your question.
Right. So, look, we all have to figure it out. That's why I was in favor of the governor's decision, because the quicker you bring closure and certainty, the quicker we can make the plans to get through the remainder of the school year one way or the other. The problem with putting this off, Clark, for another 2 or 3 weeks with uncertainty is no plans are made. So you just wait. Right. You say, well, okay, we'll wait, maybe it'll be 2 more weeks. And so I can just make the month up. So no plans get made, you go nowhere. So tough decision, but I think the governor made the right one. And now we're just looking forward to getting out of this thing and hopefully bending the curve down, doing whatever we need to do, social distancing, etc. Now let's get to the governor's decision yesterday to close down a number of businesses. That's the bad news for a lot of people. The good news is he didn't go with a full suite, which is the self-quarantine for everybody for a month, shutting all businesses down like some states have done, which is, I think, a disaster. He didn't go that route. Let us give some insight into the governor's thinking on that decision.
Sure. Sure. Well, this is, again,
walk us through that.
Sure. Well, again, these are not easy decisions at all. The governor, and listened to a bit of your show the last couple of days, he is a small business owner himself, as you know, in Hampton Roads. I have ran a small oyster company on the Eastern Shore for a few years, and also chair a theater in my home county, which has been shuttered since day one of this, and we're looking at payroll and things like that. Look, the non-essential retail businesses the governor shut down, it's not taken lightly. We understand just how impactful that is, and we need relief from D.C. and from Richmond for those business owners. But those are businesses where there's a lot of close personal physical interaction, frankly, when you look at tanning salons or tattoo parlors or barber shops or nail salons, and that is where it's most highly prevalent that this virus would spread. And we understand what that does for 30 days to these businesses, but if we want to slow the spread of this and make sure that our hospitals can catch up and our bed capacity is there when it's needed at the peak, which we are not at yet, we've got to take some common sense approaches. There's a lot of terms being thrown around, John, that I don't think are necessarily accurate. The different governors frame them differently, but when you look at what a lot of these states are doing, a lot of commerce is still going on. So it says, well, we'll have a lock-in, but you can go outside, you can go to the parks, you can still travel. So it's not really a lock-in. I think the media has really latched on to some of these terms, and they like to use them. I've been on the phone with other chiefs of staffs from different states, and a lot of us are balancing the same thing. I think Governor Hogan made the same decision yesterday to expand that list of non-essential retail services where people congregate. But basically, this is common sense. We don't want large crowds coming together. It's not 100% proven science, but 15 minutes of kind of being next to someone, being in close contact with someone is kind of roughly the time limit where this thing can more likely spread. Now that's not, like I said, 100% law, but that's a rough guide, and so you got to use common sense. And a lot of commerce can still can still continue. We have companies stepping up left and right, and I'm sure yours is one of them, John, that are taking these precautions seriously, that are doing the social distancing, that are doing the wiping things down, and we're going to have to learn to kind of deal with this for a while and call upon Virginians and call upon Americans, and they're responding. But we've got to trust them to respond in this. And it is a balancing act, and it's not one that's taken lightly. But obviously where you have bowling alleys or you have theaters, you have places where people are sitting together in large crowds for extended periods of time, we just can't have that right now. And so the governor made that decision, and I think it's consistent with a number of states. But like I said, I think the media is really latching on to what they call this, and I think it's fairly consistent with what a lot of states are doing. So,
you're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Great to have you with us. We're with Clark Mercer. Clark is the Chief of Staff of Virginia Governor Democrat Ralph Northam, who made the decision yesterday to close schools in Virginia, all private and public schools, for the rest of the spring semester, reopening hopefully in August when some of this is behind us. He also made the decision to close some non-essential businesses, as Clark was saying, in close quarters for 30 days. Clark, but the governor did resist the call of many on the progressive end of the spectrum here, without bringing politics into it. It's part of what we have to deal with, to do the complete shutdown as some other states have did. What level, look, your boss is a Democrat, he's a progressive. What level of pressure did Governor Northam have to go the complete shutdown route?
Look, I'll answer that, but maybe a little bit differently, because I want to make sure I get these thoughts across while I'm with you. One of the best pieces of advice that I got coming into this job was from a Republican chief of staff, or not advice, but note, was that he wants the executive branch to succeed, because if the executive branch succeeds, then our state succeeds. And look, we want the president and we want the administration to succeed with this. What that means is this health crisis is abated, and we can get back to the economy rocking and rolling, right? And so I want President Trump, and the governor wants President Trump to succeed. Does that mean there aren't legitimate concerns and criticisms with how things have been handled thus far? Certainly. But John, you talk a lot about sports on your show. We both come from that background. We're a team right now as a country. And I think obviously folks recognize that if we could go back in time and handle things differently, I think the Trump administration would have. But they're addressing this right now. We're talking to them daily. The governor was on a call yesterday with the vice president. Let me just give you a snapshot of what his day was like yesterday. We get a 7:30 briefing on where our numbers are, where our hospitalizations are, how many folks have tested positive, how many folks have passed away from this, what we project out. He was on a call with the entire General Assembly. We were on a call with our Municipal League and Association of Counties last night. We had a faith call with 3,000 individuals last night, ministers from around the state. We have a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday call with our General Assembly, all 140 members. We've got a weekly call with our congressional delegation and a twice-week call with our college presidents talking through this. And I had some very nice notes and back and forth with Republican leadership here in the state yesterday. And look, we can agree that we'll disagree on some policies moving forward when we get out of this. I get that. But right now, we want the executive branch in D.C. to succeed. And behind the scenes, I talk to them every day. And look, the personal protective equipment, the federal stockpile, we're making requests from that. We're not getting as much as we would like. We understand that. All 50 states are in that. And I don't think it does. Look, where criticism has to be aired, fine. I get that. I do think the press is honing in on asking that question all the time. But we're a team right now, and that's what we're focused on. So, yes, we've gotten a wide variety of opinions in terms of what the governor can do. Everyone is an expert, right? Everyone's watching TV and kind of thinks they can prescribe an answer to this. There are some balances. You've, I think, aptly pointed out that when folks lose their business, there are real health consequences to that, and that is not lost on us. So those are we hear those voices as well, and the governor's trying to make the best decisions to protect the overall health of Virginia. So I'm not going to get into detail in terms of who's called and what they've recommended. We've had great feedback from both our Democratic and Republican members of Congress. We really want them to be able to come together and get this aid package. And I would just underscore that, these aid packages and the Fed can lower interest rates and we can try all these financial tools to abate this health crisis. But until this health crisis is abated, and until there's some certainty, and that's what, the markets are not necessarily reflective of the underlying economy, but the markets are not going to settle until this health crisis is settled. And as long as there's uncertainty with what's going to happen out of D.C., you're going to see that uncertainty reflected in the economy. So that's our posture. That's how we're thinking about this. But like I said, we want the president to be successful with this. We do have some concerns with how things have been handled. I think the governor has expressed those in a professional tone. He is not getting on, the cable TV news networks. He has said he is focused on Virginia. He does a daily press conference to talk to Virginians, but that's been his rhythm and his tempo thus far.
So what has been the level of cooperation between the governor and the Trump administration?
The Trump administration is active in terms of making sure we have daily interactions with them, and their intergovernmental affairs office is who I interact with, and I share my thoughts, my concerns, my suggestions with them. And look, they got 50 governors calling them around the clock, and it's personal protective equipment, number one. There is a shortage of that. We're working with Virginia-based CEOs and companies. We've got the best state for business in the country, and we're proud of that ranking. We have turned our economic development team inwards to calling those CEOs and asking what masks they have on hand. Can they donate? Can they sell them to the state? What ability do they have to manufacture them? And look, we've talked with everyone from the coal industry to the tobacco to the high-tech manufacturing, and folks are stepping up. We've had folks donating tens of thousands of these pieces of equipment. That's one. The ventilators you obviously hear a lot about. That's not an easy thing to retrofit an assembly line and make ventilators. That's really something that we need help from the Trump administration with how we're going to make sure we have enough ventilators. And then it's staff at the hospitals, John. I mean, we've got a lot of staff that's that's not reporting, not reporting, but we anticipate we're not going to be able to sustain staffing levels, for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and so we're looking for creative ways to supplement that staffing. So it's what you hear. I mean, it's and the testing, obviously the testing. If we could have a better handle on how much community spread has happened, then we can do the community tracing, we can do the isolation, and that's certainly not news to anybody. I don't know what benefit it is for the governor to sound off every day on the Trump administration publicly when enough governors are doing that and they know that that's an issue that they're working on. So
we're with Clark Mercer. Clark is the chief of staff of Virginia Democratic Governor Ralph Northam. They just issued the order to shutter the remainder of the 2020 school year, public and private schools in Virginia. Also, some businesses closed, those in close quarters for the next 30 days. Clark Mercer, final question, metrics. We're at the end of 30 days. You heard the president yesterday. He said, I'm going to open the economy up in weeks, not months. I think the position that the president took yesterday is the virus is going to be here for a while. We're going to have to coexist with it. There's going to have to be a balance made. Fatality rates well under now 1%. I think they're about 0.07% in the United States. And those percentages are going to go down as people test positive and don't die, obviously. And so it's well under 1% now. So my concern with all these shutdowns is 30 days are up. What is your metric? When do we say, okay, it's okay now, we can go back to work? Like, what is the empirical evidence that we're going to have that it's not going to be another 30 days and another 30 days after that? Have you thought that through?
Yeah. Well, one, there's no playbook for this. And, if anyone says that there have been some modeling of different flus, but there really is no playbook for this. And so I think the president's remarks are, I would describe them as aspirational. I think everyone wants to do that. Look, 5 to 7 weeks out, we anticipate that in terms of the modeling we're looking at, that our number of admissions to the hospitals, our number of deaths will increase. And we're going to assess this in 5 to 7 weeks. We're going to look at where our hospitals are. We know how many beds we have. We know how many ICU beds we have. We're looking at that in real time. And of course, there's no governor in this country that does not want to flip a switch and, quote, unquote, go back to normal. But we've got to get this health crisis figured out. And that's the number one priority. So we're going to look at this. We're looking at this in real time. Obviously, the governor made the decision on the schools yesterday. After a week of them being closed, he made that decision. Would we like to say, hey, 5-7 weeks, we could open the schools back up? We would love to have said that. We just didn't think that was realistic looking at the modeling that we see every day. And look, I'm not going to comment on whether I think the president's right that in 5 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, we're going to quote-unquote go back to normal. I do think the modeling speaks to the fact that we have not reached the peak, or we're not close to reaching the peak of where the hospital admissions and the ICU admissions are with this.
So if it's going to be 5 to 7 weeks, why not, the way you did with schools, why not just shut the businesses down for 60 days and be done with it?
Well, we'll take a look at it in real time, John. So. And we'll
but you
see
what you're saying, though. I mean, you shut it down for 30 days, and now you're saying it's going to be 5 to 7 weeks. That sounds like 50 to 60 days. So, I mean, you already made the decision to shut down public and private schools for 5 to 7 weeks to the end of the term.
Right.
Why not just say the same thing with businesses? Because then it's like, okay, you're saying a month, but now you're saying it's going to be 5 to 7 weeks.
Well, it's not a broad brush across all of the economy, across all of society, and that's, the schools are a hotbed for kids sharing viruses. Anyone with a parent knows that, and you get one kid with this, shows up to school and spreads it. We're back at ground zero with community spread, with the tracing, so that the schools were a relatively easier decision. The 30 days distancing in these venues where there's a lot of social interaction, we're going to take a look at that in a couple weeks. We're going to look at it every day, see where our numbers at, see where our projections at. But if folks can adapt to this, then we can look at how we're going to move forward. But I think Virginians, large and whole, are adapting to this, and they are taking the governor's advice seriously. They're taking the president's advice seriously, and we're just going to have to assess this. But it's not going to be quote unquote gone in 5 to 7 weeks, right? You're not just going to flip switch and go back to normal.
No, it is going to be gone.
So,
I mean, that's the thing. So my concern with these shutdowns is there's no metric that anybody has to tell anybody when you're going to say, okay, no more 30 days, because it's not going to be, there's going to be a percentage of people sick. And so, like the president said yesterday, we're going to have to live with it for a while. Otherwise, we don't have an economy, a job, a country. Everybody's on the street, can't pay your mortgage, businesses die, and then there's suicide and stress and everything that goes with that. So, like the business owners I'm talking to, they're telling me, okay, if it's 30 days, we can figure this out. You put this into 90 days, they're bankrupt, dude. They're out of business.
Well, the same thing that you're kind of talking out of both ends here. So 2 weeks it's completely back to normal because we know that's going to be the case. Well, you don't know that's going to be the case. We need to assess this thing week by week and make informed decisions. And there are metrics. That's not true. There are metrics we're looking at. We look at how many cases are increasing every day. We're looking at how many tests. We have 3,600 tests. About 7% of our tests right now are positive. We have 7 deaths in the Commonwealth. We went 50 more positive tests yesterday, and we're looking at those trends, and we think 30 days to settle this down at this point is the right decision, and we'll reassess. But, we're not going to say, okay, shut everything down in the Commonwealth right now for a year. We're going to look at this week, and it's also equally responsible, I think, to say, hey, in a week or two, we're just going to flip the switch and go back to normal. The markets and the economy are not going to settle down in a week or two if these numbers continue to spike. That is not going to happen. So, that's... you can do all these things with small business loans and with the Fed and pushing the Fed to lower interest rates. That's not what's going to get the economy going. It's getting this health crisis solved. And so, we are going to continue to look at this and make decisions in real time. But that's the best anybody can do. So.
All right, I got to go, but I got one question from a listener that I just have to ask you. This is from Sue in Gwynns Island. Great question. She says, would you ask Clark, I'm interested in hearing the hospitalization rate in Virginia. I haven't seen anything on that. What percentage of victims are being hospitalized and what age? How many available beds do we have? Do you get that on a daily basis? I think you kind of answered that.
Yeah, and the governor is going to go over those numbers at 2 today. But we've had a little over 3,600 tested. That's the state lab plus the private labs. About 7% of those have been positive. And the governor will go over some of the numbers in terms of beds. But that's the kind of stuff, John, we're tracking. Once your beds are at capacity, John, then and you can't admit anyone else. And it doesn't matter then if they have coronavirus or they've got a heart attack or they've got some other life-threatening. Then you're in a real problem in terms of your health capacity. It's not just taking people in and treating them for coronavirus. Once you're at capacity, you're in real trouble. And so that's what we're addressing. We're working with the Army Corps, our National Guard, looking at if and when we need to build additional bed space. But that's when we talk about hospital capacity. We've got to be able to treat people not only for this, but for everything else folks need an emergency room for.
I get it. Makes sense. All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Governor Ralph Northam's Chief of Staff for being with us today, Clark Mercer. Hey, Clark, thanks for being on and sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. See ya. Bye.